For the first time, I think I need to get ahead of this video and state the following. The information within this scroll is fairly dark. I didn't feel like it would be fair to allow you to listen to this without a forewarning, but we will be talking about some very bleak topics in this video, and may have some shocking illustrations to go along with what our scribes have gathered. If you would like to skip today's briefing, I would not blame you. That said, you can expect teasing when I see you in the Great Hall at dinner tonight if you leave. No? Alright then. Before we get started, if you learn anything new from this video today, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments below. So far, 73% of my viewers are not subscribed, but I put out videos as often as I can, and I'm putting together a series of videos that will be a good primer on all things Pathfinder, with little to no spoilers for any new players or GMs looking to join the game. So please, hit that subscribe, drop me a comment, and let's get reading this scroll. Urgathoa, the Pallid Princess, or the Lady of Despair, is the inner sea deity associated with gluttony, disease, and undeath, but mostly strongly worshipped for her undeath domain. Mostly worshipped by necromancers, intelligent undead, or those seeking to become undead, she is also worshipped by gluttons and those who suffer from serious diseases and illnesses. Urgathua is most often depicted as a raven-haired woman wielding an enormous scythe. Her upper torso is clad in skin as pale as the palest of vampires, with her torso peeling into rotten strips of flesh that expose her upper organs, or at least the few that have remained. Her pelvis, legs, and feet are torn clean of muscle and flesh, revealing little more than the still animated, bleached bone of her inner skeletal system. Her clothes, if she chooses to wear any, are typically stained with blood and bile, but more often than not, she embraces a nude form. She has been seen in loose-fitting gowns, but they are always stained in black, brown, and red splotches of unknown substances, remnants of countless meals that are better left unexplored. On rare occasions, she has walked Golarion in a form similar to the monstrous shapes worn by the daughters of Urgathua, with one huge arm covered in fanged mouths and a tail made of multiple fused spinal columns. Her divine symbol is that of a death hand's moth, often drawn so that the skull markings are exaggerated, or depicted as a skull with a moth's wing, legs, and head. In life, Urgathua was once a mortal woman who enjoyed a tremendous appetite for life, someone who embraced every manner of pleasure possible and rebelled against death, the loss of living, and the ultimate judgment by Pharasma that awaited her upon completion of the River of Souls. After her death, she found herself in line amongst countless other souls, waiting to stand before Pharasma and await her judgment like every other mortal is destined to do at some point in life. However, this mortal managed to summon the strength to refuse this judgment and fled from the River of Souls. However, this goes against the natural flow of fate that Pharasma follows, and as such, her fierce psychopomps servants leapt into action and assaulted Urgathua as she fled back toward Golarion. But, surprisingly, the woman managed to defeat or escape the psychopomps, and when she returned to Golarion, she found herself a god. With her mere existence being a corruption of the natural order, it is said that her first footsteps upon the material plane birthed the first plagues and infections, and that her mere voice turned those who heard it first into the first of the shadows and wraiths. Where she walks, her footsteps leave bloody skeletal footprints in the dirt below. Whether this is true or not is unknown, but in her half-rotten form, she has found sensations limited. Touch is muted now, and flavors that previously burst in her mouth are little more than mild tickles at the back of her blighted tongue. As such, she has thrown herself into embracing further and further extremes, attempting to relive the same vivid experiences she enjoyed during full life. Ever since, she has lived in a portion of Abaddon, where she embraces all manners of debauched depravity. She has tasted the brains of infants, savoring the taste of their innocence. She has ripped the heart from the last living member of a now extinct race. just to feel the sensation of its blood spilling down her fingers, and she has inflicted painful boils and leprosy upon beautiful princes just to see the unique patterns that will form when inflicted upon royal flesh. Due to Urgathua being content and indulging in her own needs and desires, most other powerful entities leave her alone to do just that. As a result, she has surprisingly fewer enemies than most other evil-aligned gods. That is not to say she has no enemies, with Pharasma being the main opponent to her. Pharasma has an intense hatred for Urgathua due to her position as the first undead, and first to truly rebel against her judgment. As a result, Pharasma will regularly send psychopomps to pursue her and her kind wherever they can be found. Sarenrae is a mixture of ally and enemy due to wishing to see Urgathua and her followers healed, which naturally strains relationships between them, due to Urgathua seeing nothing wrong with her and her undead followers. Shaylin, the goddess of art, and her priests make vague claims that they have stolen and hidden something that belongs to the Pallid princess, intensifying enmity between the two. What this stolen object is remains unknown presently. Gorum views death by disease especially humiliating, preferring an honorable death in battle, so views Urgathua as a coward. With the quick spread of undead followers, Lamashtu also views Urgathua as a rival, since both battle for followers in the same humanoid space. The four horsemen are natural allies, and demons are popular servants and allies within her church. Nadiri, the patron saint of romantic suicides. Is this right? There's a god of romantic suicides? Has anybody told Romeo and Juliet that? Whatever. Urgathua has taken Nadiri under her wing, as she supports the belief that love endures even beyond death. Urgathua views Abadar as an unwilling ally, due to his cities being perfect breeding grounds for the plagues she creates, and also sometimes operates side by side with Calistria, as the goddess's domain of lust overlaps with her own domain of gluttony. The Ghoul Lord Cabriri and the Vampire Lord Zira are sometime allies, sometime enemies, and worshippers tend to drift between the three cults at will. Irori draws mild annoyances from Urgathua, but this is tempered by his devotion to moderation rather than pure abstinence, and she is intrigued by the idea of tasting of his physical perfection. Cults of Grotius who embrace hedonism often cooperate with the cults of Urgathua, but the nihilistic Grotians scoff at a meaningless existence as undead. Inside the outer plane of Abaddon, there sits the Seas of Lamentation, and upon its shore sits a region known as the Bloodrot. As would be expected of Urgathua's divine realm, this region takes the form of a vast necropolis sprawling around a single fang-like tower. Within the mist-shrouded streets of her realm, the undead rule and engage in debauchery in the excesses that they pursued in life. Unique to Bloodrot, the members of this realm have escaped the cycle of souls, and those who dwell here remember their mortal lives clearly and vividly. At times, they even travel back to Galarian's surface to feed, spread terror, or do their goddess's will. Interestingly enough, while the Four Horsemen are the true rulers of Abaddon, the honor of being the most powerful citizen dwelling there falls to Urgathua. Despite her power, Urgathua does not covet control of the realm of Abaddon, instead fully content in the section of the plane that the Horsemen have gifted to her eons ago. Due to their generosity, she enjoys joining the Horsemen for idle conversation, particularly enjoying chats with Apollyon and Karen, who share similar interests with her. However, most of her attention is often drawn away from Abaddon, with much of her attention drawn to the material plane, where her cult is spreading like wildfire. However, surprisingly, we have discovered evidence that her cult is not just spreading on Galarian, but is burning across countless material plane worlds, meaning she potentially has a multi-planetary presence, much like the Osirian gods possess worshippers on both Galarian and on Earth. Barathangas is a devourer, a group of beings that are created whenever a fiend or evil spellcaster manages to travel beyond the Great Beyond. Outside the Great Beyond, they undergo a transformation which destroys and recreates them, leaving an alien mind with no trace of their previous personality. In Barathangas's case, she takes the form of a powerful, extremely emaciated undead. Her white skin is so thin and tight that you can see the connecting tissue and bone structure beneath her skin. She can be called on by powerful magics to perform suitable tasks, but she requires the soul of a powerful creature in return. Fjorn, once a Lenorm king, is a burly corpse-gray undead. Once an Ulfin barbarian, Fjorn was forced to slaughter and consume his entire honor guard. After killing himself in shame, he rose as a powerful ghast, but still managed to maintain all of his barbarian abilities. During combat, Fjorn prefers to celebrate a victory with a feast made from the remains of his defeated foes. Olix was conceived during an Urgathoan new moon ritual, where he was raised as a strict Urgathua follower. At his 20th birthday, he was transformed into a fiendish vampire, with the ability to transform into shadow rather than smoke, the ability to appear in 2 different places at once, and where he hates any light brighter than a candle. Olix, despite his abilities, prefers to carry messages or buff allies and debuff his enemies as needed rather than engage the enemies in direct combat. Urgathoa's Herald takes the appearance of a giant winged skull surrounded by a cloud of flies. Created from the skull of a titan, Mother's Maw is surprisingly brilliant, as smart as any lich, but only interested in satisfying its cravings for life and sensations, much like any Urgathoan worshipper. The skull sits at a surprising 13 feet in height and weighs just over 3,000 pounds. The Maw cares little for the desires of mortals, or even the undead of the material plane, only caring so far as they impact the Pallid princess. No matter the task, the Maw will perform her job, whether that be driving a city's worth of ghouls into lava pits or devouring a sect of the Urgathoan cult. Many assume the Mother's Maw is mindless, due to its tendency to speak only when it deems it worth speaking. But, when not on missions for Urgathua, it can be found to be quite a talkative companion on the subjects of food, wine, and experiences of the flesh, and will be a surprisingly lively conversationalist, assuming its appearance isn't a distraction or repellent to the listeners. It possesses the ability to create undead, and is sometimes accompanied by skeletons, zombies, or ghouls, which will endlessly dance around the Herald, worshipping and adoring the emissary. It has been known to function as a ferry for allies into battle, or even to help a powerful undead retreat inside its bony mouth, where it relies on its own defenses to keep the passenger safe. When given the choice, the Mother's Maw will usually choose to work alongside Raveners and Vampires, her personal favorites of the undead types. When Urgathua is pleased, common food will taste like a fine royal meal. Water will turn to wine upon your tongue, and meals are never so filling that the eater becomes bloated and uncomfortable. There are stories of her worshippers, those who are starving at least, discovering injured or freshly killed meat in nearby locations, although conflicting sources say whether this meat is animal or human in nature. She rarely uses animals as her chosen messengers, but has been known to send a death's hand moth to lead her followers to their rewards, or clouds of biting flies to warn away or even punish those who are undeserving of her gratitude. Female clerics who serve her particularly well may find themselves transformed into the feared Daughters of Urgathua, which I will have to focus on fully in another briefing. But, as a brief description, they tower over a mortal female, nearly standing 15 foot in height, and possess a single massive arm that forms either a claw or blade, and are propelled by a single massive tentacle that seems to take up the positions that their legs used to possess. When Urgathua is angry, food and water will taste like ash, and will fill the consumer with a hunger that can never be sated. The target of her ire may be afflicted with rotting or swelling that makes it difficult to eat or even speak. She has been known to paralyze an offender's legs or even to reverse a mortal's sense of taste, leaving them unable to stomach anything but rotten garbage and sewage. However, those who have angered her are able to regain her favor by making a large sacrifice at a temple of hers or by experiencing a gluttonous feast, drug experimentation, or any other event of excess devoted to her name. On truly rare occasions, the only way to alleviate a curse is by willingly engaging in cannibalism, an act that will taint the soul and all but forces their allegiance to the Pallid princess forever. Now, after covering all of this, I'm assuming you've picked up that Urgathua is what we consider an evil deity. However, her full alignment is that of a neutral evil goddess. While she does spread the blight that is disease and undeath, she does not view undeath as a curse or as a bad thing, but as a way to extend the amount of time that her followers are able to enjoy all the things life has to offer. She is cruel when angry, don't get me wrong, but she does not seek to inflict pain simply because she enjoys pain. To gain favor with Urgathua, you should seek to become undead upon death. To do otherwise would be shunning the belief that indulging in excess above all else will grant eternal freedom to do as one pleases. To her, the dull existence of a dead soul is completely pointless, and a mortal's entire point of existence is to cram as much sensation into life as possible. Asceticism, or intense self-discipline and avoidance of all forms of indulgence, is particularly vile, such as practiced by the prophets of Calistrade. You must create or protect other undead, especially those less powerful than yourself, and spread her worship where you are able to without drawing the ire of less awakened individuals. Above these two previous edicts, Urgathua's followers must feed their endless hunger. You must dine in every great hall, striving to fully satiate your every craving, for she believes that a sacred truth can only be gleaned from consumption. You should try and taste the flesh and drink of the lifeblood of other sapient creatures, searching to discover all the hidden thirsts their essences may quench. Only the weak fear to indulge these yearnings that they mislabel as strange or taboo, for even a poison can be savored as a sweet nectar upon the tongue if the consumer is strong enough to relish the pain that goes alongside it. To rouse her anger, look no further than turning down a feast or otherwise denying your appetites. Destroying an undead is seen as a blow directly at the Pallid princess, as is sacrificing your life. To do so, even for a loved one, is to directly spit in the face of all those who are so desperately seeking to embrace everything that life offers. A typical Urgathoan will consist of gluttons, necromancers, cyberites, and obviously the undead. However, her worshippers focus much less on spreading her faith than they do at increasing their own personal pleasures in her name. They may first stumble upon the faith in a so-called gateway church, a place devoted to pure sensations, such as an orgy of feasts and flesh, drugs, stimulants, and other physical sensations. But after a time, most will discover that ordinary delights begin to pale, and they seek to satisfy ever darker hungers. With large swaths of her followers being either necromancers, undead, or those seeking to become one or the other, her faith is illegal in most nations and shunned in most societies that do not outright ban the practice of necromancy. She is most often followed in the Darklands, Assyrion, Ustalov, and Varissia, with Grundi and Varissians followers spread throughout the entire Inner Sea region. However, some worship of her is allowed, insofar that the desperate may pray to Urgathua to relieve symptoms of a plague, or necromancers who prove useful by putting undead to rest, or otherwise controlling them, may find a measure of tolerance, even if it is an uneasy tolerance. Outside of allowed worship, gluttonous princes or merchants may keep secret shrines, where they pray for the bounties of food, drink, sex, and other physical pleasures. In Jeb, Urgathua is worshipped openly, and her faith is practically part of the nation's official religion. Within its borders, vampiric barons, ghoul counts, and other undead nobles pray to her in chapels at midnight, praying that she keep them safe from the bright day, peasant uprisings, and abominations that wander in from the mana wastes. Public temples within Jeb are often guarded by bloody skeletons, usually nicknamed Sons of Urgathua, due to the bloody footprints that they leave behind, much like when the goddess herself walks upon the earth. The church itself is organized as a matriarchy, with a powerful cleric, usually female, as the head of each temple. If that priestess is a daughter of Urgathua, it is considered to be especially blessed. Priests who can create undead, either through direct magics or by passing on their own undead taint, are given the title of Necrolords and will receive extra privileges within the church. The church congregation is divided into two castes, those of the Gula and the Famished. The Gula are the privileged members who may or may not be members of the priesthood. They are in turn served by the Famished, initiates who are attempting to prove themselves worthy of recognition by the church. Rank inside the church may be an inversion of rank outside the church, with a Gula member being of lesser social rank than the Famished that serve them. In such cases, the Gula will treat the Famished with the respect that they deserve while in public to preserve the church's secrecy. Like many evil cults, the church is scattered and cell-based, with contact between the different cells of the church being infrequent at best. A typical worship consists of whispers, quiet chants, or eerie moaning. Drums may be used to announce visitors or feast, but music is rarely a part of the proceedings. Worshippers will usually consume a ritual meal, which could be anything from sweet meat to bread and gravy to human flesh, depending on the congregation and the priest's mood. Each temple is built like a feast hall, with a massive central table serving as altar and feast room. Even her hidden temples will use this setup, but with a much less ambitious scale. These temples will be built near a graveyard or even overtop a crypt, which are often inhabited and protected by ghouls. Wealthier churches will provide lavish feasts for the faithful, sponsored by wealthy patrons or paid for by the selling of spells or undead labor. It is not unheard of for a priest to move to a starving village and offer intoxicating amounts of food to the layfolk to gain followers for Urgathua. Urgathua promotes marriage within her church, as sharing pleasure with another is a sure way to enhance the pleasure. However, unlike your average marriage ceremony, the church forgoes vowing until death do us part, as the undead members of the church prove that vows can persist beyond death. Indeed, Urgathua even blesses unions between the living and the undead, as long as the living partner plans to join their spouse in undeath. Procreation and gender of the people involved do not matter so long as the commitment is true. Divorce, however, is frowned upon, as it shows disrespect to the partner and to Urgathua herself. Luckily enough, her followers do have an acceptable alternative: murder. Yes, it is completely acceptable to simply murder your spouse, so long as you keep them in or near your home as a skeleton, zombie, or mummy. Urgathua also does not prohibit suicide, and in some cases will even encourage it. Older priests with no means to become undead may offer their spirits to the goddess while offering their flesh to the living. However, they expect to be raised as undead of some form, either at their own expense or as a reward for service. In theory, Urgathua's faith is all about breaking and surpassing taboos, and thus, nothing is truly forbidden. However, turning your back on the church, renouncing the path of undeath, and practicing intense self-discipline is a surefire way to draw ire from the Pallid princess. Ceremonial clothing consists of a loose gray floor-length gown or tunic with a bone white or dark gray cape fastened at the front. often with a brutal clasp in the likeness of a death-head moth. Traditionally, the garment is increasingly shredded or torn as it approaches near length, mirroring the goddess's body. These garments can be heavily embroidered with tiny skulls and bones, or carefully slashed to reveal glimpses of hidden layers of red and white garments beneath the top layer, like bone and blood beneath skin. Members of the clergy may wear corsets under their clothing, either to emulate Urgathoa's hourglass figure or to conceal a growing waistline. In places more hostile to worship, clergy may take further steps to hide their membership, such as limiting their clothing to a single hidden skull or simply worn and torn clothing. Urgathoa's holy text is an extended meditation on the virtues of sacrificing all for sensation, known as serving your hunger. It's a cookbook filled with decadent recipes and instructions for preparing various humanoid races. It also serves as a primer for dealing with the undead, as well as transitioning into an intelligent form of undead, and focuses largely on vampires, ghouls, and wights. As a god who believes existence should be a constant celebration, Urgathua does not place any significance on any particular date. However, her followers have attached special meanings to moonless nights, or celestial conjunctions with the undead-filled world of Eox, believing they mark times that the negative energy plane has the greatest influence upon Galarian. On these nights, they will hold great candlelit feasts to honor the goddess and her presence and her will. Undead worshippers of Urgathua will celebrate a holiday known as Ashen Morn, which annually commemorates the day that they became an undead, much like a birthday. For some, this is a solemn day of lone personal reflection, while others see it as the day that they moved past their fragile living forms. Senior priests of Urgathua will sometimes practice a ritual known as the Reaping. The priests will put on gray robes and arm themselves with a vorpal scythe before heading into the surrounding countryside to deal as much death and destruction as they can upon Urgathua's most hated enemies. During the slaughter, each cleric will attempt to inflict wounds that splatter as much blood and gore upon their garments as possible. Upon returning to the temples, these robes will be presented at the temple's altar, hoping to be given a boon from the god herself. If successful, these robes will be hung in the main hall of the temple as a symbol of the goddess's approval of the local clergy's efforts. Followers of Urgathua may utter these aphorisms, with the two below being the most common. By the blood and the mouth. This is an oath to keep a secret, with the expectation of punishment should the secret be shared. It is usually accompanied by touching a finger and thumb to your neck, as if choking, followed by kissing or licking the first two fingers of that hand. Feed your pain. Faithful recognize that eating fills a physical and emotional need, even for the undead that don't need to consume anything to truly survive. It is the act of eating, of consuming and satisfying an urge, that is in itself the award. This phrase normally indicates the beginning of a feast, but priests sometimes say it to encourage layfolk to distract themselves from their problems with food or other excesses. And that wraps us up on Urgathua. Not exactly a topic I hope you enjoyed, but I hope I at least shed some light on this deity and her followers. If I've taught you something new, hit that subscribe button for me, and I'll see you next week with my next Halloween video.